Hi there, Rissy here with another episode of Rissy's Room, and I'm excited because this week I'm reading a book called The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses. And this book was written by Paul Goebel, and if you can believe it, this book was given to my mother when I was a baby. So this book is very special to me. And it's also very special to me because this book is about a Native American girl, a little girl. And guess what's coming up soon? Indigenous Peoples Day. Yes, Indigenous Peoples Day is right around the corner. So that's why I wanted to share this book with you. Now, you may know Indigenous Peoples Day as Christopher Columbus Day. And in fact, in 1989, South Dakota was the very first state to change the name of Christopher Columbus Day and to call it Native Americans Day. And since then, Michigan, Wisconsin, and the District of Columbia, also known as Washington, D.C., have all changed the name to be Indigenous Peoples Day. And so what I wanted to do before we even read the book is I want to do something called a land acknowledgement. And that's a really important thing because many years ago, this land that I'm sitting on right now, it did not belong to my family, it belonged to other people. And so a land acknowledgement allows us to pay respect to Indigenous peoples by recognizing where they came from and affirming who they are today. All right. I am sitting on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway Anacostan, and Piscataway Manahoac people. Historically, they were a confederacy of tribes under the premier authority of the Tayak or emperor. Their confederacy extended between the western shores of the Chesapeake Bay to the watershed of the Potomac River in the area now known as Virginia. And it also covered all the land from the southern tip of St. Mary's County north to Baltimore, including Montgomery, Anne Arundel, Prince George's County, and Washington, D.C. We pay respect to their elders past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that brings us together here today. In fact, every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. And that's why we do land acknowledgements. And so now you know, if you live in Maryland, now you know who lived here before us. It was the Piscataway Anacostan, and the Piscataway Manahoac people. How cool is that? All right. Now, let's find out why this girl loves wild horses, shall we? The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses. Story and illustrations are by Paul Goebel, and the illustrations are amazing. The people were always moving from place to place, following the herds of buffalo. They had many horses to carry the teepees and all their belongings. They trained their fastest horses to hunt the buffalo. There was a little girl in the village who loved horses. She would often get up at daybreak when the birds were singing about the rising sun. She led the horses to drink at the river. She spoke softly, and they followed. People noticed that she understood horses in a special way. She knew which grasses they liked best and where to find them shelter from the winter blizzards. If her horse was hurt, she looked after it. Every day, when she had helped her mother carry water and collect firewood, she would run off to be with the horses. She stayed with them in the meadows, but was careful never to go beyond sight of home. One hot day, when the sun was overhead, she felt sleepy. She spread her blanket and lay down. It was nice to hear the horses eating and moving slowly among the flowers. Soon, she fell asleep. A faint rumble of distant thunder did not waken her. Angry clouds began to roll out across the sky with lightning flashing in the darkness beneath. But the fresh breeze and scent of rain made her sleep soundly. Suddenly, there was a flash of lightning, a crash, and rumbling which shook the earth. The girl leapt to her feet in fright. Everything was awake. Horses were rearing up on their hind legs and snorting in terror. She grabbed a horse's mane and jumped on his back. In an instant, the herd was galloping away like the wind. She called to the horses to stop, but her voice was lost in the thunder. Nothing could stop them. She hugged her horse's neck with her fingers twisted into his mane. She clung on, afraid of falling under the drumming hooves. The horses galloped faster and faster, pursued by thunder and lightning. They swept like a brown flood across hills and through valleys. Fear drove them on and on, leaving their familiar grazing grounds far behind. At last, the storm disappeared over the horizon. The tired horses slowed and then stopped and then rested. Stars came out and the moon shone over the hills the girl had never seen before. She knew they were lost. Next morning, she was wakened by a loud neighing. Neigh! A beautiful spotted stallion was prancing to and fro in front of her, stamping his hooves and shaking his mane. He was strong and proud and more handsome than any horse she had ever dreamed of. He told her that he was leader of all the wild horses who roamed the hills. He welcomed her to live with them. She was glad, and all her horses lifted their heads and neighed joyfully, happy to be free with the wild horses. Neigh! Can you neigh? Can you neigh like a horse? I want to hear you. All right. The people searched everywhere for the girl and the vanished horses. They were nowhere to be found. But a year later, 2 hunters rode into the hills where the wild horses lived. When they climbed a hill and looked over the top, they saw the wild horses led by a beautiful spotted stallion. Beside him rode the girl leading a colt. They called out to her. She waved back, but the stallion quickly drove her away with all his horses. The hunters galloped home and told what they had seen. The men mounted their fastest horses and set out at once. It was a long chase. The stallion defended the girl and the colt. He circled round and round them so that the riders could not get near. They tried to catch him with ropes, but he dodged them. He had no fear. His eyes shone like cold stars. He snorted, and his hooves struck as fast as lightning. The riders admired his courage. They might never have caught the girl, except her horse stumbled and she fell. She was glad to see her parents, and they thought she would be happy to be home again. But they soon saw she was sad and missed the colt and the wild horses. Each evening, as the sun went down, people would hear the stallion neighing sadly from the hilltop above the village, calling for her to come back. Neigh! Neigh! The days passed. Her parents knew the girl was lonely. She became ill, and the doctors could do nothing to help her. They asked what would make her well again. I love to run with the wild horses, she answered. They are my relatives. If you let me go back to them, I shall be happy forevermore. Her parents loved her and agreed that she should go back to live with the wild horses. They gave her a beautiful dress and the best horse in the village to ride. The spotted stallion led his wild horses down from the hills. The people gave them fine things to wear, colorful blankets and decorated saddles. They painted designs on their bodies and tied eagle feathers and ribbons in their manes and tails. In return, the girl gave the colt to her parents. Everyone was joyful. Once again, the girl rode beside the spotted stallion. They were proud and happy together, but she did not forget her people. Each year, she would come back, and she always brought her parents a colt. And then one year, she did not return and was never seen again. But when hunters next saw the wild horses there galloped beside the mighty stallion, a beautiful mare with a mane and tail floating like wispy clouds about her, they said the girl had surely become one of the wild horses at last. Today, we are still glad to remember that we have relatives among the horse people, and it gives us joy to see the wild horses running free. Our thoughts fly with them. And in the back of the book, there's a Navajo song about a horse, and also Black Elk and Oglala Sioux had a dream in which he heard a stallion sing a song. So I'm going to make sure that we show you those two songs about horses. And this is just one story about a Native American girl who loved horses. And it's mostly a story about our connection to horses and our connection to everything in the entire world. We are connected to the birds and the bees and all of the fish in the sea. Oh, we're all connected. It's only one world that we live on, one planet. And so we are all connected. And I want you to please take the time before I read you another book next week and find out who lived on the land that you lived on. I would love to hear about it. So please let me know. You can do so on my Facebook page if you would like. Let me know if you find out who lives on the land that you live on. And also, don't forget, please subscribe to our page. And then you get to get all the updates every time I load a new book to this page. How does that sound? Does that sound good? All right. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful, 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 wonderful week.